Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending this presentation on the Winter Island Park Pathway and Bank Stabilization Project. We're going to just give it a minute or two. It's 7 o'clock now, but we're just going to give it one or two more minutes to see if anyone else jumps on before we get started. Thanks. All right, Barbara, Tabitha, you ready to get started? Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. This is a presentation of the Winter Island Park Pathway and Bank Stabilization Project. Providing a project update and next steps. We can go to the next slide, please, Christian. I'm Neil Duffy. I'm the Director of Sustainability and Resiliency for the City of Salem. The project team for this project includes myself, Christian Team, who's also part of the Sustainability and Resiliency Department, Patty Kelleher, Preservation Planner, Rachel Vreslovich, I think is the way to pronounce her name, who's our conservation agent, and Dave Gilbert, who's the manager at the park. Barbara Warren, Environmental Consulting, is assisting us with project management and outreach and engagement. We have Wilkinson Ecological Design, and their team is with us tonight, Tabitha and Duke. Also, not a part of the panel, but a really important part of the team. We had Public Archaeology Laboratory, Epsilon Associates, and Salem Sound Coast Watch all assisting. And of course, the funders of the project were the Coastal Zone Management Team, which is Catherine Glenn, Julian Neisel, and Patricia Bowie. Really, not just project funders, but really important members of our team and providing really important guidance along the way. Next slide, please. We're going to go over, do a brief project overview. I'll introduce some of the project at the beginning, and then Barbara will provide more of the in-depth project overview as well as some of the permitting work that's happened over the last year. And then Tabitha and Duke from Wilkinson will dive into the really interesting details of what we're hoping to do and planning to do at Winter Island Park over the next 2 years. And then we'll talk about those next steps and some of the benefits of this project and the continued community engagement that'll be happening and take any questions. If people do have questions along the way, please use the Q&A function on Zoom, and we'll try to keep an eye on that. We may answer those questions as we go, or find times to answer them either during the presentation or at the end. So we'll do it that way, and please let us know through the Q&A function if you're experiencing any technical difficulties. Next slide, please. So this project is this is the third year we've been working on this project. We've been fortunate enough to receive two CZM coastal resilience grants for this project in fiscal year 24. So calendar year 2023, we received a 1 year grant to do an assessment of Winter Island Park to assess the erosion and damage that's occurred along the coastal bank and the pathways in the park, and to start to think about potential ways to address that damage. There was also some work done to close some of the pathways that pedestrians and park visitors were using that were also contributing to some of that. And there was an awful lot of community engagement to find out how people were using the park, to educate people on the invasive species that were there, to do some invasive management and mitigation. And at the conclusion of that, we applied for and were lucky enough to receive a second grant, which is the one we're in now for 2 years, to further develop those plans, bring them the plans to address the erosion and damage that's at the park, and stabilize the coastal bank. Bring those plans to 75% design and to fully permit the project so that we can then move towards implementation. And we're really excited to say that we're at that 75% design point and we are fully permitted, which is great. It puts us in a really enviable position, and it was after a lot of hard work that we'll get into in just a minute. So that's the background, and then I'll hand it over to Barbara to dive in a little bit more.
Next slide. I'm going to be talking about the project overview, as he said. So I know the people who are on the call now, this is being recorded. So there may be somebody in the future who doesn't know what Winter Island Park is, but it is an amazing place that you should all visit. It has public beaches, open space, trails. You go there for cool breezes, or to sit in the winter and watch the beautiful ocean, a state-owned boat ramp, a state-financed pier, and an RV and tent campground. And I think it's the only, certainly on the North Shore, the only public, municipally owned RV and tent campground that's on the coast. It has a community sailing program, and there's just so much more, as you all probably already know. So just the pictures say it. The pictures are explain what's the beauty of Winter Island. Next. And it has an incredible history. And so it was really important in this project that we protect the cultural resources and document them. And so PAL, the Public Archaeology Laboratory, has been our partner in this. The Winter Island has this deep history that dates back to more than 6,000 years. Archaeological evidence shows the area was used during the pre-contact Archaic and Woodland periods. We want to acknowledge this as indigenous land and acknowledge the Massachusetts tribe who call this fishing place Namkag their home, and who continue to honor and hold this land into the present. With European colonization, Winter Island became the center for Salem's fishing trade throughout the 1620s to the 1740s. During the colonial period, coastal fortifications were built as protection against the navies of foreign powers. The lighthouse that we see here was built in 1871 but discontinued by the Coast Guard in 1969. Next slide. This project is in the Winter Island Historic and Archaeological District and is listed in the State National Registers of Historic Places. Established in 1643 during the colonial period, it was named Fort Anne and then later Fort William And then before becoming Fort Pickering, after its reconstruction during the development of the first system, which goes from 1794 to 1801, but basically it was for coastal defense against the French. The second system was of coastal fortifications took place around the War of 1812. And then substantial expansions took place during the Civil War and again in the mid 20th century by the U.S. Coast Guard. But the fort, as we can see in these pictures and as we know, retains aspects of the original 17th century with the rectangular plan earthworks and the dry laid stone ramparts enclosing a level parade ground. But I want to call attention to these amazing photos. The top one I found in the Winter Island Master Plan of 2011, and there was no, I don't know where that came from or the date, but the one on the bottom was taken in 1930. And I just want you to call attention to the fact that there is no vegetation on it, on or around the fort. And when we get to invasive species, you know why. Next slide. So then in 1930s to 1973, the United States Coast Guard took over the park, and it was a sea rescue station. So again, two amazing photos. One from the Salem Winter Island Master Plan, which is the pictures dated 1940. And you see the people on a wooden ramp where people inside and around the hangar. Uh, and you see the other ramp and the lighthouse. On the bottom right, you can actually see two seaplanes. Hopefully your screen is big enough that you'll be able to see that. But some amazing history at this park. Next slide. So let's move into what it is today. This is just a photo of one of the many storms that pound our shores. This was taken at Waikiki in 2020, but I'm sure all of you have pictures, and many of you have pictures that would be similar. So these storms are going to continue, and we need to protect our coastline. Next slides. So what I'm going to do now is show you the areas that Tabitha and Duke will be talking about, the areas that we have called out as in dire need of restoration. So I really wanted people to be located as to where these projects were taking place. This is on Waikiki Beach. If you come down the concrete sidewalk down to the beach, you'd go to the right and towards the fort. And that orange arrow is pointing at the top of the rampart. Again, looking very different with all these invasive plants, bittersweet, um, on the edge of it. And this is behind the revetment. Next slide. And this is at the top. So again, you see the orange arrow on the photo on the left. And that is the same area. That's that tree that's coming out of the bank and is bent over, blocking some of the trail. You have to sort of bend under it to get down the trail. And we all know who walk it, it gets steeper and steeper as the paths are eroding. So erosion is a huge problem for the rampart. Next slide. And that's the same up at the headland by the lighthouse, where there are benches that we can look out over Salem Sound. And what we have here are the pictures of actually storm water that is causing these rivulets or runoffs or divots into the coastal bank. Okay, next slide. And then we have the southern shoreline, which washed away, I think it was either 23 or 24 in a winter storm. A lot of our storms now are coming from the south, beginning in the south, and before they work their way around east to northeast. And so the bank here really got hammered a couple winters, and we had to close, like Neil said, we had to close this path off. Next slide. And then we all know who have been there, the erosion that has been persistent at the parking lot edge. And every time you go out there, you can see that the grass area is being undercut and it's getting more and more dangerous. Next slide. So the goal of the Winter Island project is to focus on the coastal vulnerability that is increasing due to sea level rise and the aging infrastructure. It looks as though those where the areas we're talking about may have been um, remediated some in 1976, but very little or any, if anything, has been done there since then. And as I said, we're seeing more and more changing. We're seeing ch the weather patterns changing, which is going to make these areas even more vulnerable. So our goal is to improve the shoreline resilience and stabilize the eroding banks at Waikiki Headland, parking lot edge, and southern shoreline using nature-based solutions rather than hardened coastal engineering structures. And with this, we hope to protect the coastal banks, wave and storm damage prevention function, which is very important, and restore a more native seashore habitat that enhances a wildlife habitat on the island and in Salem Sound, preserve the site's unique archaeological and historical significance, and maintain and improve public access. Next slide. And now, oh, permits. I was going to pass it over to Tabitha, but we wanted to let you know what we've been doing this past year. And for the past year and a half, we've been working on obtaining the permits needed to stabilize the bank. First, we submitted to an expanded environmental notification form and proposed environmental impact report to MEPA. MEPA is the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act. There were three things that triggered a MEPA review. It's not a permit, but it's a review. That was the historical archaeological resources on the island in the project area, that is located within a designated geographic area around environmental justice populations. And lastly, it's proposing to alter coastal banks. We're very pleased to receive in September the certificate from the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs with the final environmental impact report. So then we moved on to the Salem Conservation Commission to receive an order of conditions. That's through the Mass DEP file number. And then because the parking lot is in filled tidelands, Chapter 91 was also involved. This project was received approval to move forward under a minor project modification, which has saved us a great deal of time. And they acknowledged that this was a modification would work here because the bank stabilization improvements to a public parking area, all because all the proposed work is landward of the mean high water line, which is very important to remember. And it also determined that the existing footprint of previously filled tidelands and the changes to the fill structures and parking, the use was insignificant deviation from what already existed. And they wrote, the project is needed to stabilize this bank and to preserve the public's access to filled and current tidelands, which is consistent with the statutory interests of Chapter 91, which is a public trust document. So we were very pleased to get that all behind us and under our belt. Next slide. And then, of course, we've been doing the Massachusetts Historical Commission reporting, and PAL has been doing that for us. They kept them up to speed. They got permission to the archaeological survey, filling out the MHC forms, and they will continue to do site excavation in FY 27-28 as this project we hope goes forward. Next slide. Now I get to introduce Wilkinson Ecological Design and have Tabitha and if Duke, but I'm not sure if Duke or you're speaking or not, but waiting for question and answers. So please move on with our ecological restoration, Tabitha. Thank you.
Sure. So good evening, everyone. As Barbara just mentioned, I'm Tabitha Cagle and Duke Bitsko from Wilkinson Ecological Design. Um, we were initially brought into this project to perform an assessment of the coastal erosion and invasive plant species distribution throughout the park. Neil mentioned that initially. During this assessment, four key locations were identified as being good candidates for nature-based coastal stabilization techniques, which utilize biodegradable core-based materials and native plants to help mitigate the effects of the accelerated rates of coastal erosion that have been produced over the past several winters. Through that process, we completely completed an alternative analysis of different types of nature-based coastal stabilization that could potentially be utilized in this project. And we landed on two particular solutions that we think will provide the most benefit to the four project area locations. And those four locations, which Barbara already went through, are off of Waikiki Beach, off of the headland, the southern shoreline adjacent to the kayak racks, and then the edge of the eroded parking lot. Next. So I wanted to throw in, before we talk about each individual area, I wanted to show a slide of when we say nature-based coastal stabilization, sort of what are we talking about? And if you look closely at this slide, these are the two solutions that will be utilized in the four different projects areas. One is a fiber roll array and one is reinforced fiber roll lifts. And if you look at the illustrative graphics on the left-hand side, they're very similar. The major difference is the lift is built up on a compacted base of sand, whereas the fiber roll array is just placed directly into the existing native soil. And if you look to the right, you can see zoomed out photographs of what those sorts of interventions look like as they're being constructed. So there is a little bit of excavation, and these fiber rolls are placed into the face of the bank. They kind of look like a big, if you haven't seen them before in project, a big hot dog. That's, they're each 10 feet long. And so this is just a little overview to give you a taste of what we're talking about. And we can go into this in more detail after we go through the four project areas. Next. And so this is just another slide that shows sort of the sequence of construction, a little bit more zoomed in on an actual project that we have done work on. The first before photo shows on the left a really eroded coastal bank. This, of course, is in a different situation than Winter Island Park, which is rocky. This is off of a sandy beach, but similar techniques can be used in both these locations. The middle photograph on the top shows those fiber rolls as they are placed into the bank. And then the right-hand photo, what that's showing is where you see the sandy part on the lower left. That is the fiber rolls. They get covered in sand at the end. And once they're been placed, they get covered in sand to protect them from UV degradation. And then what you see above that sand is the erosion control blanket that goes to stabilize the bank above that fiber roll array. And that's what gets planted. And the bottom photo shows this completed project. This is several years on after it was completed, but you can see where that erosion control blanket is showing that we've got a completely vegetated site, and it's full of really good native soil retaining grasses and shrubs, and it has a really natural, beautiful look. And this is essentially what we would be aiming for with the project at Winter Island. Next. So Barbara did go over each of these project areas fairly thoroughly with photographs, but we can talk a little bit more about each of these. This is a sort of an illustrative diagram showing the Waikiki Beach project area. So if you were to walk down the pathway to Waikiki Beach and you were to turn right, that coastal bank that's just above that revetment that's sort of falling apart there is where the project is located. And that area, if you the area in orange is where the fiber rolls would go, and the area above that in green is where that erosion control blanket that we talked about on that last slide, that's where erosion control blanket would be placed after the invasive plants that are covering that bank would remove. And Barbara sort of mentioned that if you look in the right-hand photos, there's bittersweet, there's shrub honeysuckle, many invasive plants on that bank. And one thing to highlight about the nature of a lot of these invasive plants, especially bittersweet, if you look at figure 2, you can see that eroded face of the bank. And so even though it looks like there's vegetation on the bank, you can really see the bare soils growing underneath the bittersweet. And the real goal is to get those soils to be at a more stable angle and to be well vegetated, which is really what's going to help retain that bank over the long term. Next slide, please. So this is a capture of the plan that we've permitted through conservation. It doesn't have as much color coding, but it does have the planting plan, the fiber roll array, and the area for invasive plant management. And the goal throughout, each of these project areas is to stabilize the bank and also improve and retain all the public amenities that people enjoy in this park. And so some of the key points for the Waikiki Beach improvements include, we're removing invasive plants. We're going to replant a very comprehensive native plant community with good root systems that really hold in those soils. One thing to mention as well specifically is that Barbara did show on one of her slides, there's a really steep eroded section of pathway as that pathway cuts down back to the Waikiki walkway. And so that area is proposed to have a little bit of remediation and fill in there so that it's not such a steep, deeply eroded slope. One other thing I'd like to point out, in order to access the work location, because it's really above that revetment, but it's between that area between the revetment and the bottom of the coastal bank is a sand ramp would have to be placed over those rocks in order for equipment to get there. And that's pointed out, there's sort of I don't know how well you can see it, but a striped hatch leading up to the fiber roll arrays. Probably can't see it very well, but anyways, the sand will be placed to help equipment access that. And then when the project is over, completed, that sand will remain and it will become beach nourishment. So also good for the beach as well. Next slide, please. So the second project area is we're calling the headland, and that's the rampart of the fort that faces the Fort Pickering Lighthouse. As Barbara had already mentioned in some of her slides, erosion in this area is happening sort of from storm action at the bottom of above that goes above their revetment and sort of at the bottom of the bank there, as well as you can see it in figure 2, these series of deep eroded channels. Stormwater flow is being directed down those during rain events. In addition, if any of you walk there, you can also see in figure 1 on the bottom left that there's a really old degraded stairway that will be incorporated into the footprint of this project. So again, if you can see that thin orange line on the plan, that is the area. It's about 300 feet of fiber rolls. And the reason fiber rolls were selected in this location is that it is a little bit higher in elevation, and it also is it's a very narrow area. So we wouldn't be able to fit lifts in there without impacting the outline of the fort and potential archaeological artifacts. So we went with a solution that really fits in that space and will respect the confines of the fort to the extent possible. Next slide, please. And again, this slide shows the permitted plan that we worked with in conservation. It shows a planting plan, essentially the same things that you saw on the last slide, but a little more fleshed out. And just some key points again about this project is that that dilapidated stairway will be removed, and the footprint of that area where that stairway is removed gets incorporated into the fiber rolls, into the native plant restoration, and becomes just part of the bank. The existing benches may have to be pulled back and realigned a bit from their existing location. They propose to all remain, but just be realigned. And of course, this project, there's many invasive and non-native plants on that bank. And again, we're proposing to remove those and plant native species in their place. One other thing I should mention, and I actually should have mentioned for Waikiki as well, so these nature-based solutions, once the plants go in, they do take a couple of years to really get established. And so for those couple of years, typically we would install a temporary plant establishment fence just to keep foot traffic off of those areas. That won't affect the pathway. The pathway will remain open, but it's really those areas where those native plants will be placed. And it's just necessary to give them a good establishment period without foot traffic. Next slide. Okay, and we're on to the southern shoreline. For the southern shoreline, we're proposing the reinforced fiber roll lifts. The lifts provide a little bit more protection in terms of areas that are really directly impacted by storm surge, and this area has clearly been impacted directly by storm surges, as we had talked. It was mentioned earlier in the presentation, that eroded lower area in Figure 1, that pathway that is now closed off. In addition, like if you were to walk around the corner from the eroded pathway, Figure 2 to the right shows a section of coastal bank which is also slumped. It's basically broken off and slid down. And so for this area, the orange hatch area shows the relative footprint of those fiber roll lifts, and the green area above does show where erosion control blanket and native plants will go. Next slide, please. So again, this is a snapshot of the conservation plan that was recently permitted, and key points with solar and shoreline improvements, as we just discussed, removing invasive plants, replanting native plants. One thing specific to call out in this particular project area is that at the top of that coastal bank where that eroded footpath originally connected to, we are proposing to plant that obsolete trail with additional native shrubs and grasses. It's not a trail that goes anywhere anymore. There's still complete access around the headland. It's just that one section of trail will be replanted. Next slide. And finally, we get to the parking lot. And for this area, we are proposing reinforced fiber roll lifts. Again, this is an area that is in a velocity flood zone. It gets hit by storm surge. It's very open and exposed. And it's approximately, let me just check here, 300 feet of coastal stabilization, which you can see in the orange hatch. So this project is a little bit different in that there really aren't invasive plants here. The project area above the fiber rolls, maybe we can switch over to the next slide, please. I can describe that a little bit more. So we have that eroded edge of the coastal bank, and then we have that grassed area where there's the gazebo, where there's seating, and what's being proposed here is all of that is getting incorporated into this project, and all of those things will be retained on this site. But if you look on the lower right-hand part of the slide, you can see a cross-section of what is proposed to happen here. And the reinforced fiber roll lifts will be placed into that face of that eroded bank, and the whole thing gets covered with a low sort of dune-like covering that will be planted with beach grass and other native plants that are really good at retaining soils. And so what this essentially does is everything moves landward about 7 feet. So the parking lot, the seating area, the parking area, the parking lot all moves landward about 7 feet. And so in addition to that, when everything moves back 7 feet, the gazebo is proposed to be relocated because could we go back to the previous slide? If you can see in figure 3 on the upper right, and certainly many of you who have been there will know this, the gazebo is, in its current location, has become seriously undermined. Could we go back to the next slide? Thank you. And so the gazebo will be moved approximately 50 feet, but remain in the same orientation and facing that it is now, up to a slightly higher location, which should protect it for the longer term. And that, if you look on the diagram on the left, there's a little star, and that star is where the gazebo currently is. And you can see it says timber gazebo on helical piers. I don't know if anyone can see that, but it's moved about 50 feet to the north. So that's one thing that's happening in that area above the fiber roll reinforced lifts. Some of the other things that are happening, the benches and picnic tables will remain and be realigned. In addition, there will be more accessible benches and an additional accessible picnic table that's proposed. And there will be accessible parking both near the proposed location of the gazebo and towards the rain garden. Next slide, please.
Tabitha, I'll just mention that the gazebo, the plan is for it to be a new gazebo of similar size and design at the new location, not the existing moving to that site. Thanks.
Good point. Yes, it will be a new gazebo that is similar in dimension and size to the existing one. So that was a quick overview of the 4 project areas, and I wanted to dive back into the coastal stabilization materials a little more closely, just so we can revisit those now that we've talked a little bit about what's being proposed for each area. And this slide just is more of a close-up of the type of materials used for these systems. So what you see, those 3 photos on the right-hand side are the biodegradable jute and coir erosion control blanketing being installed. The middle photograph are the fiber rolls, and the bottom photograph are the cabling that gets used to wrap around those fiber rolls and tightened into the ground to hold those fiber rolls in place. Next slide.
Tab.
Sure.
I just wanted to add to kind of give the public a visualization. Those fiber rolls are 20-inch diameter, so almost 2 feet in diameter, and they're incredibly dense. And we use those so that they last a long time before they biodegrade, fill up with soil and biodegrade.
Yes, that's a good point as well, Duke. So those fiber rolls are organic materials which do eventually break down and biodegrade. But the long-term goal with that is that once those break down, it's the plants that take over that stabilization of the coastal bank. And so this slide is showing some of the plants that are proposed for these throughout these 4 areas. And what it's showing is the depth of the root systems for each of those species. And so that is the ultimate goal of these projects, right? The fiber rolls get installed initially. They provide stabilization for the bank. The sand that goes over those fiber rolls provides nourishment to the nearby coastal resources and the beach. But over the long term, as those fiber rolls biodegrade it's these deep root systems of these plants that are really going to hold that soil particulate together and help slow down that rate of erosion. And that's why things like, the plant temporary protection fence to give those plants the best start possible, is really important in projects like these. Next slide, please. So this is a plant palette of some of the plants that are being proposed in the various project areas. I don't think we need to get too deeply into these, but these are all great native plants. They're adapted to coastal conditions, and they look beautiful too. I mean, I think that that's another benefit of this project is that some of those invasive plants they're just really unattractive, and they don't provide good soil coverage. They don't have the habitat benefits as well for birds and wildlife that the plants shown in this photograph will provide in the long term. Next slide. This shows photographs of what is being proposed for that 4-foot high plant establishment fence. And one of the goals with this fence is if you look at it, you can really see how, for lack of a better, how not visible it is. It isn't proposed to be a solid fence. It's something that is easily seen through and looked over, so that even though it will be in place to help those plants established, it won't block views. It won't have a large presence. It's simply to help those root systems get established. Next slide. And then I wanted to just show a few more slides of, we're calling it a case study, but it's a project that was constructed. Again, it is on a sandy beach, but just to show more specifically what that process looks like to build these solutions. So what this photo is showing, if you look in the white dashed area, that is the coastal bank above the fiber array, which has already been installed. And you can see it peeking out on the sort of bottom left hand corner of the photograph. To the right, it's covered in sand nourishment. And so what's happening in this photo, I don't know if you can see, there's a person on that bank and they're rolling out that erosion control blanket and they're staking it into place. So that is, after the fiber rolls have been installed, that is the next step. Next slide, please. And so this photo shows what it looks like right after that blanket is installed and planted. And you can see all the plants that have been put into that erosion control blanket. In addition, there's seed and other herbaceous plants that are underneath that blanket that will sprout up. The fiber rolls are completely buried in the sand, which is at the bottom of the photograph. Next slide. And then this is a photograph of the same area after 2 growing seasons of establishment. And so what you can see is those areas, it is a winter photograph, so it is a little hard to see the shrubs, but what you can see is how much vegetation has taken over in that area. From that previous initial planting slide to this slide, that's about 2 years. Again, those fiber rolls are covered under a covering of sand at the bottom. One thing the sand does is help to protect those fiber rolls from ultraviolet degradation and keeps them in place a little bit longer. And I believe this was our last slide. So I think unless anybody has any questions or Duke wants to step in with anything, we can move on to the next part of the presentation.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Tabitha. Yeah, if people have questions, they can ask them in the Q&A. So just briefly, that was a great overview. It's really exciting to see all of the projects that you all have done and all of the established native plants in those different areas. It's really exciting to think about Winter Island transforming in that way. So thanks again for sharing that. So we are furiously working on a grant application right now that is due on Friday, which we are applying to the Massachusetts to Coastal Zone Management again, as well as Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant Program. The state agency that both of those agencies fall under is Department of Energy and Environmental Affairs. So they have a new grant system where you can apply for multiple grants at the same time. So the CZM grant is likely the most likely grant, but it's sort of up to the grant reviewers to decide ultimately what the funding source will be, if they will be funding it, and what that funding source will be. So we are applying for all of the work that was just described in that grant. It would be a 2-year project. And if awarded, we would be bringing the 75% design to 100% design over the summer, and then beginning the construction and implementation of the Waikiki and Headland project in that first year, over the fall and winter and spring of 26 and 27. Avoiding construction in the busy summer months, and also in the early fall. And then in fiscal 27, we'd be moving on to the southern shoreline and the parking lot. That's how we're proposing it, and hopefully we'll be, if we're awarded that grant, then we'd be starting right up, hopefully as close to July 1st as possible. Next slide, please. I think we've talked about this. So I just talked about year one and year two. We've talked a lot about the benefits, but just to reiterate, this project would restore 4.5 acres of coastal habitat. The four distinct project areas are all nature-based solutions that we'd be implementing. We'd be removing 0.043 acres of impervious parking lot, which would help with storm runoff. We'd be restoring native vegetation and reducing invasives, reducing the erosion rates, and increasing the safety and accessibility of the area for people who use the walking paths, as well as creating some ADA compliant accessible walkways, benches, picnic tables, and gazebo access that does not exist now. So I think some great improvements to an already well-used and well-loved resource in Salem, hopefully coming soon. And I think there's another slide.
I'll get my So now we're going to go into community engagement, wrapping this up. As we've said, and some of you have participated in these, it's been a very important part of the project. These are all pictures of things that we've done in the past. You see the bottom right, we've done the invasive species, mainly bittersweet, cutting. And so there's a list of what's coming up tomorrow morning, Wednesday, 9 to noon. Susan Marsh with Salem Sound Coast Watch will be cutting bittersweet. Not sure exactly, but it'll probably meet at the rain garden, if you're interested, and she will have tools and gloves. Then she's doing another one on April 18th. This is going to be a Saturday morning, 9 to noon, in the same area. Then we found on April 15th, a Wednesday evening, at the Salem Historic Commission, John Kelly with PAL is going to be there for the first half an hour to describe to the Salem Historic Commission what the project has been, and sort of an overview of what the work they've done and what they've found. So that is on Zoom, and the public is able to attend. But we know how interested people are on the Fort Pickering history. So you can see down at the bottom that in 2024, we did a very well attended history walk, and we're going to do that again on May 15th. It's a Friday from 12:30 to 1:30. They usually go a little longer, but Patty Kelleher, the preservation planner, will be there. I will be there. We can talk about the project. We can talk about climate change, erosion, but John Kelly will be there to talk about the very significant history and archaeological background of this area. So that's should be a really good day and should be much better weather. And we will probably have some more events in June, so make sure you stay tuned. The Salem Public Input Project website is the easiest way to do it is just type in Salem Public Input and you go to the page and then you can just find Winter Island and all the other projects that the city's doing are up there too. But that's always a good way to check out what's happening in the project. Also on that website is a story map that Salem Sound Coast Watch has made for the project. It will be updated in the future. But again, you can find history and maps in that story map. Next slide. So now it's time for Q&A. Any questions? And do they have to type it in or can they raise their hand and ask and then how do you
I think people can raise their hand.
Yep, it looks like it. While people are doing that, just Christian, go to the next slide. It didn't fit in here, but I think it's a pretty amazing. I think we've shown this before. But again, this was when the Coast Guard had the project or had the park area, and you can see the outline and the lack of vegetation. So when there's no vegetation, then that's when we get all the invasives taking over, which has happened. Any questions? Guess we did too good a job, huh?
I'll just say there was a question during the presentation about where the recording will be. It'll be on the public input, the city's public input project page for this project. If you Google Salem Public Input Winter Island, then you should find it. I put the link in the answer there, but the project information is up there. There's up until now, all the project information should be up to date. We'll try to make sure it is, and then we hope to post this recording in the next day or two. So please share it with people.
It looks like Linda has a question. She has her hand up.
Christian, are you able to?
Your mic is muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I frequent Winter Island. I'm a big, fan of Winter Island, and I park along that grassy area with benches and tables. I know we're going to be losing some parking spaces. It's so tight parking there in the summer, and when it's full, we have to go up on the grass in the back on the hill. Is there any plan for additional areas of parking in the area, or are we just going to have to go up to the grass on the hill if we can?
Yeah.
And sometimes we can't. It's full there.
Yeah, so it really important. I mean, I know it's incredibly busy now, but we won't be losing any spaces. We're just moving the spaces that are along that bank. The bank will be moving back 7 feet, but then there will be parking spaces 7 feet back, and that's the same number of spaces that are along that coastline will be there. They'll just be moved back. And we've worked with public safety and the harbor master to make sure that will work with all of the traffic, both vehicular and boat traffic that's coming in and out of there, and they're on board with that plan. We did restrict the parking in the parade ground area in the fort last year because it was damaging that area. And as part of this project, we were learning how sensitive that area is archaeologically and historically. So we really, and ecologically probably shouldn't have been allowing parking there in the first place. So I know that is limiting the parking there, but it's also really important in terms of maintaining the area and the valuable resource that it is.
So I don't know where you live, Linda, but there is, I learned from this project that the Salem trolley will take Salem residents for free, and they go through here. And was there any other way to get there, Neil? Of course, you can walk, but that's sometimes difficult. But I know the Salem trolley is just another way of
Yeah.
getting to the park and not having to park. Any other questions?
Looks like Claire is asking what sorts of equipment will we see during the project?
Hmm.
Tabitha and Duke, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So the types of equipment that would be used would primarily be an excavator, and possibly a bobcat or a dingo or some other type of equipment. Those are the primary pieces. And then of course, to transport sand, there would probably be some dump trucks, which would be limited to the paved parking area.
And a project is, well, like Waikiki will be done first, and then it will be finished, moved to the headland. So it's not like we're taking the whole park over all at once. These are all going to be, the four areas will be staged. Christian, you can go back to the Q&A slide if you want. Yeah.
I think I can't remember if we mentioned it when we were talking about permitting, but another aspect of the implementation, the construction project, is that PAL will be monitoring the excavation work to ensure that if we do come across anything of historical or archaeological significance, we're treating that appropriately, and just paying attention to that when we're working in those sensitive areas.
Well, I hope you will share what's happening with what we've been doing at Winter Island, and what we hope to do, and share the project with your neighbors or your friends or the people you meet out at Winter Island. We would greatly appreciate that, and we hope that some of you will join us at the community engagement events, either the walk, the historic walk, or the bittersweet. Um, and like I said, there will be more opportunities.
Yeah, and please, if you have additional questions or comments that you didn't think of tonight, please reach out. You can reach out to either me or Christian at the city, or to Barbara, and we're happy to connect on the project anytime.
Mhm.
And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tabitha and the project team, for all the work and great presentation. And thank you all for attending and your interest. Have a great night.
Thank you. Have a good evening.